And we're going to talk about central bank digital currencies, CBDC. So we'll go ahead and bring on our panelists. I will be moderating the discussion. First up, we're going to have Bill Wirtz, journalist and podcaster of the Consumer Choice Center. Give it up for Bill. Beautiful. And now we have Austrian journalist and podcaster of Was Bitcoin Bringt fame, Niko Jilch. Okay, gentlemen, let's start off on an easy one. Central bank digital currencies. I'm going to throw out a definition, and let's see if we agree or disagree. A central bank digital currency is a digital form of money issued by a central bank that is available directly to consumers. How did I do?
Do you want to start? Well, it's not money, it's a currency. That's the first thing. And the designs of these things are not very clear, so there's two things, a retail version, which, yes, you would be issued directly to consumers, and then there's a wholesale version, which is basically just cleaning up the back end of the banking system, making it faster and more user-friendly on the back end for the bank. So there's 130 countries working on central bank digital currencies right now, and then they all have slides saying, and then we need to make them interoperable, right? Because everybody's cooking their own soup. So the best definition for a central bank digital currency, or for the idea of a central bank digital currency, is there is this quote, and they say it was by Henry Ford, but I actually Googled it, and like all quotes, they say he never actually said that. But the quote is, if I would have asked people what they wanted when the automobile was invented, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And the central bank digital currency is exactly that. It's a faster horse. You take the system that is failing and you put it in a digital format, and then you have to spend a lot of time explaining to people why we need this, because we don't. So it's very hard, actually, even for people who don't care about Bitcoin, people who don't care about money, it's extremely hard to explain the central bank digital currency to them, because they use Apple Pay and credit cards already, and for them money is already digital.
Okay, Bill, what did you think of that definition, or do you have something to add to Niko's exposition?
Well, ultimately, it's the realization that most of, for instance, in the case of the euro, it's the realization that most of the euro is already digital. So it's about, was it M3 is what, 90% is already is only digital, and most consumers, for instance, are not aware of this fact. Ultimately, it's a substitution. So Pascal Donoghue, who's the Minister of Public Expenditure of Ireland, and actually also the Eurogroup president, he wrote an article for Politico Europe this year in which he says, ultimately, this is supposed to rival cryptocurrency, and which are controlled by private institutions. He's presumably under the assumption that there's a Bitcoin company that governs Bitcoin. He hasn't fully understood it. And this is supposed to be the competition to, as he explains it, maintain the sovereignty of state currency. So this is not, I mean, they explain it as sort of, this is an easy to use, helping people who are unbanked, but ultimately this is about competition. It's reacting to people using alternative payment services and people using too much cash over which they have no control.
I love that, and I think let's place ourselves in the mind of a central banker. Niko, I'm a central banker. I'm in my nice office. I've got my beautiful pictures on the wall, my flags.
My helicopter on the helipad.
Yes, I got all of that. The helicopter's there. And I say, you know, Bitcoin, that whole thing, whatever, it's kind of interesting. But blockchains, that's the real innovation. And we're going to do this in our own way. If you were to respond to the central banker, how would you respond to them?
You know, we talk a lot about AI, and we talk a lot about robotics, and we talk a lot about how, you know, basically the machines will take our jobs, right? And then the picture that we get sold on is always, you know, the poor people losing their jobs, people that work in the supermarket, at the cashier is losing their jobs because we can scan our things ourselves. And everybody knows it doesn't really work, and the cashiers have to stand there and look over our shoulders to see that we don't fuck it up. But that's the idea that we get sold on, right? And when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, right? If computers could do our work, the first jobs that we would have to get rid of are the high-paying jobs. Those people that contribute nothing to society and are just a burden because they sit around in a bureaucracy all day long. They don't even know how they got there. Yes? So basically, I want them to understand that, it's better, instead of a cashier losing their job to a computer, it's way better if Christine Lagarde loses her job to a computer.
Even better. Even better. Okay. So before we get there, though, let's imagine a CBDC future. So we're at the BTC Prague in 2026. A central bank digital euro already exists. Bill, if I'm a normal conference attendee, what is the particular threat, or do you think a danger that I would have in that scenario in a few years' time?
Well, ultimately, the question is, will cash still exist? So what is the place of cash in that future? I would assume that as long as the use of CBDCs, the digital euro, is optional, nobody in this room will be using it. I hope you won't. What it will look like, I mean, it's hard to tell. I'm actually also not of the opinion necessarily that central bankers are necessarily very keen about the adoption of CBDCs. They are under the impression that they maintain the stability of the currency, but the implications of moving completely to central bank digital currencies is that they'll have to answer the hard questions. For instance, are you getting interest on your CBDCs? Right? I mean, I'm getting interest on my current bank account. So will I also get it with my central bank digital currency? How do I take out a loan? Does this mean I have to drive to Frankfurt or have like an ECB branch where I apply for my loan? And I don't actually think most central bankers want to bother with all those functions. So I don't think in 10 years we can actually get to an adoption stage. Right now, it seems that at the end of this year, I wrote this down because I never heard this before. They are going to a predetermination stage or something like that. It's one of those, before we will research whether we should do the research. So I think we are very early in the stage of adoption and what it will look like in 10 years. I think we'd rather be looking at 20 years. I think the people in this room would not adopt it. I think most people are actually not that interested in giving away that control. The amount of cash people still use is significant, and I think ultimately for Europe, there will be political pushback because there is good news on the CBDC file, which is that ultimately it will require political authorization. So I know the crowd here is not necessarily, I'm sure you guys hate politics, but if you want to do something about CBDCs, once this enters European Parliament and national parliaments, it might be a good moment to get interested in sending an email to your representative, talking about this online on a political level, because there is a political way to push this back and never make this happen. It will need political authorization, so we'll have parliamentary debates about what the privacy implications are, what the implications are for how you will be allowed to spend those CBDCs, because that's something we're going to get into, sort of the Germans call that Leitpolitik, sort of the steering mechanisms of how are you going to be allowed to be using your central bank, like your digital euro. So that's something that we're going to have thorough political debate over. So I'm not worried about the next 10 years, more 20 to 30.
So we explained that a little bit, but Niko, who therefore is pushing the idea of CBDC? Because the central bankers, obviously you'd like to have them out of a job, working at McDonald's or another establishment. It seems like there's not a lot of interest on the side of politics, perhaps not with banks, private banks. So where does this originally come from?
One thing I'm absolutely certain about is that they are rushing it. They are rushing it. When they talk about privately issued money, they talk about the Libra thing and the Facebook thing. That is the thing that really shocked them into action. I don't know how much understanding there is about the quote-unquote danger that Bitcoin poses to the central bank model. I think that most of them are probably not even entertaining the idea. Obviously, they're not entertaining the idea that a life without a central bank is possible. So for them, it's just immediately a shutdown. There's so many aspects to this. So let's try and get some aspects. Why are we even talking about central bank digital currencies? Well, Neil Kashkari, the president of the Minnesota Fed, he said that in a video that is very interesting. He said he doesn't get why the American people would want a central bank digital currency. He gets why China would want it, because then you can control everyone and tax everyone in a centralized database. And of course, the countries with the highest grade of surveillance and the lowest grade of freedom are the first ones to introduce central bank digital currencies. Then there is the second step. The second step is that the Europeans are looking around, right? And they see the Chinese doing a central bank digital currency. And the problem with digital currency, of course, is that it does not know any borders. And our whole financial and monetary system is still built on the concept of a nation state. It doesn't make any sense anymore, but it's built on the concept of the nation state. So a part of them, of the Europeans, are afraid that we will run around with paying with yuan on our digital wallets. Another part are not afraid. They see what the Chinese are doing with regards to control and steering and surveillance, and they love it because they are communists. Then there is a third part that says, we look at what the Americans are doing, and the Americans are more relaxed because the Americans know that the dollar is already top dog, right? And when you look into a cryptocurrency exchange, all stable coins are dollars. Yeah? When you log on to Binance, I'm not condoning that, but if you log on to Binance, you will immediately understand that nobody, even in a world with central bank digital currencies, nobody needs 130 different central bank digital currencies. We're all happy with the dollar. So what you see now is that smaller countries like Indonesia, they want to introduce a central bank digital currency as the only legal tender, and they are now starting to ban crypto payments, not because of Bitcoin, but because of Tether. All right. Then there is the idea, of course, economists. Economists scare me. They really scare me because they are the ones with the craziest ideas. So like the zero lower bound, meaning you can't lower interest rates too far because people will take out the cash and put it into safes, which is their right? Lagarde said this. If there is an escape, it will be used. So they want total control over all the money, so they can just press a button and devalue the currency, or even have control of our spending habits and stuff like that. I agree that it's not going to be easy for them to implement, and not as easy as they think it is. And when you look into China, where all the political questions have been answered, for example, the banks. If I was the CEO of a bank, I would oppose this until my last breath. Yes, because what they can do, and the banks are already set up for this, right? If I have an account with the central bank, they can just let banks fail and centralize the system even more. With every banking crisis, they let the banks fail, and the depositors get rolled into the central bank. Maybe afterwards you go to a bigger bank. In China, when you really look at, I haven't been there, I haven't looked at it, but when you look at least the little we know about the news, how is the digital yuan doing? It's not doing great. Nobody cares. People will take the yuan when they get it for free and spend it immediately, basically what the El Salvadorians did with the Bitcoin they got, yes? Nobody cares. There is countries around the world who have looked into central bank digital currencies and said, yeah, well, no. Switzerland has already said they're not going to do it. Denmark has said they're not going to do it. Japan has said they're not going to do it. There is laws in different states in the US that already banned the use of central bank digital currencies, even if they don't exist yet. But the Europeans, of course, they want to be, I don't know. I'm very worried about that. All
right, well, let's go on that theme. Bill, you know these institutions. You understand a bit the different cultures in Europe. Is there going to be enough of a force Is there going to be enough cleavages between the countries to stop any implementation, or do you think it'll just carry forward?
Well, the interesting thing is that even though central bank digital currencies do benefit authoritarian governments, I think in Europe it will be quite the reverse. It's not that Hungary will be the one arguing for the introduction of a CBDC. It will actually be the countries that are under the impression that this furthers the goals of the European Union. So, for instance, the way that Pascal Donoghue from the Minister from Ireland, the Eurogroup president, argues this is that this underlines the sovereignty and the political aims of the European Union. So ultimately, there will be, I've been accused as well of making this into a slippery slope. So look, eventually there will be control over how you spend your digital euro. But it's very transparent in the sense that parliamentarians look at this and say, well, overall, the European Green Deal tries to reduce your meat consumption. So why not have an instrument in which we can, see how much meat you buy in a supermarket and actually eventually restrict that? There's parliamentarians who are excited about those instruments. And incidentally, are those from the presumed liberal democracies. About what Niko says, I think it would ultimately require a significant crisis. Because the structural implementation, I think, is less likely rather than something significant happens. I've never had a curfew in my life, but then suddenly we had a global pandemic and, it became normal that the government told you were not allowed to go outside. I'm from Luxembourg originally, and we have banking secrecy in Luxembourg. And we always thought that there was never going to be put any question on the idea that the government was not allowed to see what's on your bank account. But then in 2008, when our neighbors started calling us tax havens and, depriving the glorious welfare state of the French from the resources it owes from its citizens, now suddenly we were targeted, and banking secrecy now only applies to you in Luxembourg if you are a resident of Luxembourg.
Thanks, Obama.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, and Sarkozy and the Germans. Anyway, so these things can happen very quickly, and that happened in a time span of just 3 to 4 years. So I think it will necessitate a significant crisis, but the political will is already there. Even though not all governments necessarily understand what they want to do with it, they know we have to get ahead of this, and we see this with a lot of the financial regulation. The EU now is politically at a point where they think they need to be first with these things. Payment Services Directive, MiCA, they want to be first on everything, and they will also try and be first on CBDCs. So we'll just have to define, what crisis will have to happen for them to fast track it.
Regulate first, innovate later. Niko, one point to you, because we talked about, the idea of buying meat, perhaps buying guns or ammunition, or perhaps buying way too much fertilizer for your farm. These are things that governments right now can penalize through taxation. They make taxes higher on petrol and your gasoline for your car because they want you driving less. In a CBDC system, it will go much further than just taxing it. It could be a scenario where your payments are blocked if you try to buy the meat. You've reached your quota of how much gasoline you have this month. What would be your worst fear if you had a CBDC economy and what they would stop or restrict?
It's funny because it goes directly to the anti-fragility of Bitcoin. And that's the interest. There's this saying that, what is this good for Bitcoin? Everything's good for Bitcoin. Because the thing is, you can either let it happen, and that would be good, right? Or you can try and fight it. And that's also good because then you pressure people into what the governments would call the gray economy, the peer-to-peer economy. And we've seen this time and time again. In Nigeria, for example, where they banned Bitcoin and Bitcoin usage immediately, skyrocketed by like 30%. Why? Well, because first of all, people are not stupid. When they see the government banning something, they immediately say, okay, that must be a good thing, because our governments are idiots. But then the second thing, of course, is a world where we have quotas for what we can buy. Yes, I mean there are crazy nutcases out there who basically live in a death cult who want to regulate us until we just like little heaps of misery. But in practice, what would happen? In the Soviet Union, and they were probably the farthest along turn their people into heaps of misery, right? In the Soviet Union, gold ownership was banned. So if you had the money, you just had about 600, wedding rings, and every time you go to the market, you come home and you leave your wedding ring there. So what would happen if I wanted to get meat, and I'm already above my quota? There will be a Telegram group, and I will just ask anyone if they're under their quota and what the price is, and then you would go and buy my meat for me, and I would sap you for it. But I think, because Bill said it's gonna need a crisis to implement this. Even if politically, technologically, everything works with a central bank digital currency, the main problem, the fact that the currency itself is pure bullshit, does not change That does not change. The monetary system does not change. The monetary policy does not change. You still have an inflationary token that you don't want to hold. So you cannot change that. It's impossible within the system. So we are coming to a nexus where more inflation actually needs more control, and it enters a world with maybe even a stagnating or declining population and technological deflation. It's just gonna blow up. It cannot work. It cannot work. So I don't know if we ever see the implementation of a central bank digital currency on a broad scale. Everybody says it's gonna happen. If you already say it's gonna happen, if you go into a football match and say, yeah, I'm probably gonna lose this, yeah, then you are gonna lose this. I see lots of voices that are saying, no, we don't want that. And in Europe, I would ask anyone who does anything with law to find out if we can if the central bank is even allowed to do this. And if they are, don't we have to maybe open up the European treaties? Have 6 different referendums until the French finally say yes? That would give us 20 more years.
Honestly, I'm not so sure about this, because there were a lot of things that we thought were not doable in the European Union, and that happened just in the last few years. Common debt obligations, Euro bonds, that was a complete no-go, and that just happened 2 years ago with the largest budget that the European Union ever dreamt of conceiving. EU taxes happened in the last few years. We'll get eventually to direct EU taxation. So I think these things, it's a bit like the Juncker model of implementing policy. So first you announce it, then there's some pushback, and then people forget about it a year later, and then you slowly introduce it anyway.
It's a classic.
Yeah, there we go. And I think that's also the operating model here. Ultimately, it will also require some action from you guys. I mentioned, so on the political level, I think to get engaged in that discussion is very important. Politicians have staff that reads the news, they scan the news. When you guys comment, when you guys publish a news article or a blog, they read those things. It's not futile when you push back against these things, wherever it is, if it's on Twitter, on wherever. That's important. And then also, when you use fiat, pay cash. I know it's so convenient, the level of convenience with credit card points and all these advantages, it's nice, it's convenient to use Apple Pay. But when you can, even just for the sake of helping your local corner shop not pay taxes, pay cash. So that is also a method.
Or use Bitcoin, Bill, as much as you can.
The biggest one more thing. One of the biggest defenders of the cash systems are actually the EU member states in which cash use is the highest. So I think as long as we have Germany, Italy, Austria, the use of cash cannot be practically banned. So I think you guys also using cash when you use fiat is a very important sign, and incentivizing people to do it, insofar that you cannot pay with Bitcoin, obviously.
I think it's important to understand, because I think your first question was also, who are the stakeholders here? Who is pushing this, right? So who is really pushing it? The central bankers, they love, getting more power. Then you have banks, technology companies, credit card companies. They are threatened by central bank digital currencies, but at the same time, they see a chance to make a lot of money with, writing papers, doing consultation, doing experiments, right? There is the crypto people, you know. It's an open secret that the Ethereum people want CBDCs to run on their system, for example. So there's lots of cash to be made. There's lots of stupid conferences where they sit around and pontificate about the future of money as being the digital euro. And then there's also the political sphere. And I'm not so sure about this political sphere. And I'm not so sure if the political will is really there. Because what we see right now is actually a fight between the governments and the central bank, especially when it comes to inflation. So the central bank is trying, you know, to rein in inflation by hiking rates right now. Yes, but the governments and the politicians, they want to be re-elected. So they are just standing there, literally like Erdogan. They're just standing there handing out cash, right? And then the governments, and then. You know, what happens when the rates go up? What happens is that, you know, building new houses get more expensive. What do the local governments do? They basically guarantee for your loan. There is 100% of the new loans given out in Italy right now are guaranteed by the government. And the perfect thing is, it doesn't even check up their sovereign debt levels, because a guarantee for a loan does not go into the sovereign debt level. Only if you fail and then the government has to pay for the loan, it goes into the sovereign debt. So it's free for the politicians. And so I see central banks trying to regain control with central bank digital currencies, and that's something, if I were a politician, I would not want to give them. And it's something, if I were a banker, I would absolutely not want to give them. So there are going to be stakeholders here who are fighting this, and it's not just the public, it's also the bankers and some politicians who want to fight this. And what I do agree on is that anybody, you know, the only person in the ECB who is worth their money is the poor soul running the Twitter account. Because whatever they do, there is 500 Bitcoiners trolling them.
It's a lot of work.
And even though I do, of course, do very serious work, if you want to, quote unquote, fight the system, the most important thing is to not take them too seriously. Ridicule them at any point possible, because they do not know what they're doing, and they are playing with our future, and they are playing with our children's future, and it needs to stop.
We can't forget we're still in clown world. Okay, everybody. Well, you have the energy now. Thanks so much to Niko and Bill. Thank you guys for listening. Let's keep on the flavor. Thank you guys so much. Give them all a big round of applause.
Thank you.